Hello everyone, I'm Congressman Tim Walz. It's a real honor to be able to pay tribute to the 34th Red Bull Infantry Division and to your families and friends as you prepare to deploy in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. As a 24-year veteran of the National Guard and the Red Bull Division and a retired Command Sergeant Major, I'm especially proud of you. I'm a retired Command Sergeant Major. I spent 24 years in the Army National Guard. We view ourselves in the future of Minnesota. I talk to them, I tell them I'm a school teacher, I'm a retired Sergeant Major.
What rank did you retire at?
I retired as a Master Sergeant in
Okay.
EA. I stood one night in the dark of night on the tarmac at Bagram and watched a military ramp ceremony.
Say there are different ranks, they say they were in combat, you know, like he did with his weapon of war thing. I mean, it's just disgusting that he continues to still do it. I just can't get the guy. I mean,
I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks, we can do CDC research, we can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Before the end of the campaign, Tim Walz is going to be talking about how he was carrying an M16 through the jungles of Vietnam. But this guy, everything that comes out of his mouth about his military service is at least 25% a lie.
Command Sergeant Major, retiring 4 years late after a tour supporting the war in Afghanistan.
I'm not a politician, and I never plan to run for office.
Country are so excited not only about the entire shift in the country, about what you did here. Electoral politics at the grassroots level, believing that we could run a hard-working, honest campaign. Keep our integrity, keep our integrity, keep our integrity.
The 2024 election cycle should have been a special time for veterans. It was one of the very rare times in history where both vice presidential nominees were at prior service. Unfortunately, one of the candidates, Governor Tim Walz's career, became one of the points of contention during the political cycle. Even over half a year after the election, his stolen valor accusations are still haunting him to this day. Obviously, in the last 10 years, politics has become more and more misconstrued. You essentially have to fact check every accusation against a political figure. Tim has spent decades in politics, and you could say he has made great or terrible decisions during his time. This video isn't a critique or analysis of his political career. This video will cover what I believe is needed to decide whether or not Tim used his military career as a political stepping stone and misrepresented his service to the voters. First, we'll do a brief background summary of his career for context, and then we'll go over the 6 questionable points of his military service. Just like the Tim Kennedy video I did, there is an ungodly amount of information to go through to find the relevant facts. After a few weeks of researching this topic, there are definitely a few points I found that didn't make the rounds in big media. This video will be the video I wish already existed. As always, there'll be timestamps below if you want to skip to a specific accusation. But please don't forget to knife hand that like and subscribe button. Without further ado, this is Governor Tim Walz's full stolen valor story. Timothy James Walz was born in West Point, Nebraska in 1964. After high school, Tim would join the National Guard in 1981, enlisting as a 13 uniform, which is a field artillery soldier, at the age of 17. Tim would move around the country after working on the family farm in Nebraska to Texas, then Arkansas, working various jobs while serving the National Guard, and ultimately returned to Nebraska, where he had completed a degree from Chardon State University with a bachelor's degree in social science education in 1989. After college, Tim would accept a teaching contract and go to China for a year before returning to Nebraska to teach high school social studies. After 16 years of teaching in Nebraska, Tim and his wife would move to Mankato, Minnesota, where he would teach geography and be a football high school coach. On February 10, 2005, Tim decided to make his formal pivot in politics by filing to run for the U.S. House of Representatives Minnesota 1st Congressional District seat. Tim would run as a Democrat under the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party, unopposed before going to the general election against his Republican opponent Gilbert Gutnick. His career capitalized on his experience as a soldier, farmer, and teacher. Having worked in these respected professions gave Tim the connection to his district in regards to understanding the first-hand issues that the people were experiencing and how to address them. Tim would ultimately end Gilbert's 12-year career in Congress and win the election by a 5% margin. During his 12 years as a congressman, Tim was the highest ranking enlisted service member to ever serve in Congress. During his first year in Congress, he received a waiver from Speaker Nancy Pelosi so he could serve on multiple committees. These would be the Committee for Veterans Affairs, the Agriculture Committee, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and the Armed Services Committee. This was quite the abnormality for a junior congressman. but it illustrates the relevance of his military, teaching, and farming background and its benefits to his political career. After over a decade in Congress, Tim would announce that he was running for governor of Minnesota when the current governor, Mark Dayton, announced that he would not seek re-election in 2017. A year later, in November 2018, Tim would be elected the governor, beating his opponent with a healthy margin of 53% to 42%. Fast forward to August 7, 2024, Vice President Kamala Harris would announce her presidential running mate, Governor Tim Walz. As we all know, their campaign would not succeed and Tim would return to his governor role. Before we begin breaking down the stolen valor accusations, some things to note that Governor Walz accomplished during his time as governor to support the veteran community are signing Chapter 38, House File 1937 into law that provided over $75 million to be used to assist homeless veterans, better fund the Minnesota National Guard, and assist with Gold Star families. He also supported numerous bills that addressed concerns at the VA and protected whistleblowers and expanded medical treatments for veterans such as research on medical marijuana. The first major stolen valor accusation that we will analyze is Tim lying about the rank he retired at. So first, let's hear from Governor Walz what rank he retired at from the National Guard.
I am a retired Command Sergeant Major in the Minnesota National Guard.
Tim Walz, I'm a teacher from Mankato.
Yeah.
Retired Command Sergeant Major in the Guard.
I'm a retired Command Sergeant Major. I spent 24 years in the Army National Guard. As a 24-year veteran of the National Guard and the Red Bull Division and a retired Command Sergeant Major, we view ourselves in the future of Minnesota. I talk to them, I tell them I'm a school teacher, I'm a retired Sergeant Major.
Affairs Committee, and a position I've taken not just because I'm a retired Command Sergeant Major.
To his fellow veterans, he is Sergeant Major Walz.
Well, it seems it should be very clear what rank he retired at, since it's been at the forefront of him and his peers introducing himself throughout his entire political career. The first time Tim would have his military service questioned would be in 2018, as he campaigned for governor of Minnesota. A gentleman named Tom Behrens, who served with Tim and is a retired Command Sergeant Major, would be an integral part of bringing Tim's stolen valor accusations to the public domain. But we will discuss them more in the following allegations against him. The most important part from Tom's accusation is him accusing Tim of retiring early and losing his rank from the decision and misrepresenting himself to the public. Initially, Governor Walz's report of separation record of service would surface that would seem to support Tim's retirement rank. In Section 4, we can see that he was an E9, which is a Sergeant Major or Command Sergeant Major, and that he was promoted to his rank in April 2005. Case closed, right? Thankfully, people continue to dig into his story. Well, in September of 2022, Alpha News would discover that there was an NGB Form 22A that illustrates that there were corrections to Tim's discharge summary, and that he actually retired as an E8 Master Sergeant, not an E9 Command Sergeant Major. I know this might be a taboo concept to civilians, so I'll do my best to explain. When you are promoted past the junior enlisted levels in the military, there are different training and overall competitiveness requirements depending on the level of promotion. From E8s to E9s, you have to attend something called Sergeant Major's Academy and sign a contract obligation for earning the rank. Sergeant Major's Academy is typically a year and a half, and the service obligation on top of that is another 2 years of service as an E9 to be fully eligible to be considered a Sergeant Major and retire as such. In the meantime, you are conditionally promoted or frocked and wear the rank while you complete the requirements. And if you fail or don't meet the 3.5-year requirements, then you're demoted. Going back to Tim's report of record, we see his effective date is June 2005, with a separation date of September of 2007. So there is no way that he could have met the time requirements to be a true Sergeant Major. Again, for those who think that this is just semantics or wordplay, I want you guys to picture the person at work that no one likes. We all know that person that when the boss is on vacation and they have to cover down on some of the boss's responsibilities, they promote themselves in their head for the rest of their career. Or when someone gets demoted at a job and then gets fired or quits, but still explains their experience as ending in the higher role. I hope you're ready for a comical example. This is the most universal example I can think of that might make it a little clearer. If you've watched The Office, do you remember when Jan was going to promote Josh, the sales manager in Stanford, to the regional manager? But he was just using that conditional promotion to leverage the job at Staples. Well, he was never actually the regional manager. He was just beginning to transition into the role. That's essentially what Tim did with his rank. Tim danced around the topic for years until recently. On July 12, 2025, when Congressman Stabber was grilling Governor Walz about sanctuary states, his rank was brought up and he finally was backed into a corner.
Congratulate them that they helped us work on the largest pension bill for Minnesota law enforcement in 30 years.
Claiming my time. Governor, what weapons did you carry in war?
Congressman, for 24 years, I carried...
No. What weapons did you carry in war?
What did you carry in uniform?
I'll
You
tell you
know I
what, Governor,
misspoke.
you're
You know I
barking down the
misspoke.
wrong tree, okay?
You know I
You
misspoke.
lied to the Minnesotans. You said that you carried weapons in war.
Mr.
That
Chairman.
is stolen valor. You know what? My wife
Yeah,
served 25,
Mr. Chairman,
24 years in the
I
military.
a little bit of
respect for the
and
witness.
she's an Iraq war veteran.
You know what I mean?
She was
This
over in the
hectoring is not-
war
not-
zone. That's
On a point
stolen
of-
valor, and I'm so
Point of order,
disgusted with
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
And so are the people that you served
Point
with.
of order.
Point of order.
That's
Halt,
stolen valor.
just a minute. Stay.
Stolen valor.
Mr.
You didn't
Chairman,
carry weapons
that's
in
not questioning
war.
the witness.
Congressman, my 24 years was
That's not
public for
Will you
many, many
apologize
years.
for lying?
Objection.
Will you
No, I misspoke.
apologize for lying?
Objection.
All right. Hold on. Pause.
That's not questioning a witness. That's not questioning a witness. You think
Point of
so,
order.
huh?
State your point, Mr. Rankin.
No, you're yelling
your
at
point.
him. You're
There you
hectoring.
go.
You're hectoring. You're hectoring.
right.
You're hectoring.
State your
Governor,
That's-
you didn't carry
that's
weapons
not-
in war, did you?
State your point.
You didn't
Proceed.
carry
You
weapons
got
in
24
war,
seconds.
did you?
Congressman, you know I
didn't carry
misspoke.
weapons in war, yes or no? You lied. Governor, what rank did you retire at? What rank did you retire at?
Congressman, I served my battalion as the command sergeant major.
That's not the
and
question
for
I asked.
pay,
What rank did you retire at?
I retired as a master sergeant in
Okay,
EA.
here's your coin that says you're retired at a command sergeant major. That's
Says
your
I wore
challenge
that.
coin.
It
This
says
is-
I wore the rank.
This is that's right. You didn't retire, did you?
I did
Stolen
retire
valor.
after 24 years.
Here is a picture of your coin, your challenge
Jesus
coin.
Christ.
I'm disgusted.
For the first time since the accusations came out in 2018, he directly admitted the rank he retired as. Bringing up his challenge coin was just the icing on the cake during this. The first person I believe to bring light to this was Bree A. Dale, a journalist for Daily Wire. On August 11, 2024, she posted a picture of his challenge coin with the caption asking if he misprinted his coin. If you're a veteran, I'm sure you'd agree him printing the command sergeant major rank when he didn't retire as such is definitely inappropriate. The saddest part about all this is the suspected reason he lied about it. The speculation behind the reason is he did it so he can market himself as the highest ranking enlisted service member to have ever served in Congress.
Because of that, I also stand before you in a humble position of being the highest ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in this body.
Championship seasons. I put on the uniform of the Minnesota National Guard and served. I have the distinct privilege, honor, and responsibility of being the highest ranking enlisted soldier in the history of the United States to serve in the Congress.
But I also had another career. I spent 24 years in this nation's uniform. And I have the privilege and the responsibility of being the highest ranking enlisted member of the military to ever serve in the United States Congress.
Well, without the lie, that would have been true. Yes, there are a lot of officers that serve in Congress that outranked him. But in regards to the enlisted side, if he would have owned himself being an E8 Master Sergeant and still marketed himself as the highest ranking enlisted service member, that would have still been true the whole entire time he was in Congress. Now that title belongs to Tony Gonzalez, who retired from the military as an E9 Master Chief Petty Officer. But he didn't become a congressman until 2020. The only other E8 in Congress is Derek Van Orden, who retired as an E8 Senior Chief Petty Officer. But he didn't join Congress until 2020 also. So again, he would have still had that title the whole entire time he was in Congress before he became governor, and now would be tied for second place in history, which is still an amazing resume bullet point. But the truth just wasn't good enough for him. The most serious accusations come against the governor's military career is him dodging a deployment to Iraq. This is where we'll go back to retired Command Sergeant Major Tom Barron's first time calling out Tim in 2018. Unfortunately, I cannot find the original clips of Tom's press conference and Tim's response, but there are clips from the Care 11's channel from August 7, 2024.
I'm retired Command Sergeant Major Tom Barron's from Brewster, Minnesota.
Tom Barron's accused Walz in 2018 and again in this 2022 news conference of bailing on his troops before they got sent to Iraq. He claims they knew as early as March 2005 their unit would be deployed, yet Walz chose to retire first.
He knew damn well what was going to be going on, and that's why in May he was gone.
Here was Walz's response.
We all do what we can. I'm proud I did 24 years. I have an honorable record. I served with literally thousands of people.
He said he retired after 24 years in the Guard to run for Congress.
And I simply moved on to try and serve something else.
Care 11 asked the Minnesota National Guard for the timeline. They told us Walz retired in May 2005. Walz's unit, the 125 Field Artillery Battalion, received an alert order 2 months later, in July 2005, and their mobilization order came in August 2005.
Another retired Command Sergeant Major Paul Herr would also come out and criticize Tim's service and decision and timing for retiring from the National Guard before the deployment. Alpha News would conduct interviews with both of these gentlemen. I will show some clips from the interviews, but I highly encourage you to watch the full ones that will be linked below. First, let's look at Tom's interviews.
Back in 2005, a warning order went out to the 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery to mobilize for a mission to Iraq. At the time, Walz served as the unit's highest non-commissioned officer, but months later, Walz would retire from the Guard, avoid the deployment, and run for Congress. Tom Behrens was next in line for the position and was asked to take his place.
I was like, well, for Pete's sake, if this guy quit, and if I say I'm not going to do it, I mean, what the hell kind of leadership is that?
The story, the full court press.
We, retired command sergeant majors of the Minnesota National Guard, feel it is our duty and responsibility to bring forth the truth as we know it concerning his service record.
But clear that up for us. Did he know your unit was about to be deployed to Iraq when he decided to retire?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've said it for years that the warning order came out. I mean, I was at drill in Stillwater, and when the brigade got the order, there's no doubt he got it. I mean, the E2s in the unit knew it came out in March, you know, and it was like, you know, the spin came out that, well, the alert wasn't until July, and he got out two months ahead of time, you know, and it was just, you know, all this, well, he was just lucky, whatever.
Something I want to highlight is that Tom sent Governor Walz's office a letter when Tim was a congressman with the concerns, which makes it even more surprising that he wouldn't stop making these statements and leaning into his military service, knowing how his peers felt and they weren't going to let it go and continue to try to bring light to the discrepancies. Now let's look at retired Command Sergeant Major Paul Hurst's thoughts on the situation.
He also basically did no time as a CSM, maybe 14 days. He basically was a CSM for 14 days. You remember 2 weeks, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. He didn't do an annual training. He went into the holiday season. Drills are pretty confined, especially back then. They probably had, maybe something for Thanksgiving, something for, Christmas. They're going to have a Christmas party, so on and so forth. There's not a lot of time there. And so then January, and he may have had a couple of command and staff meetings because of the notice of sourcing that came out.
The biggest takeaway I want us to focus on from these interviews is intent. Going back to what we discussed from the back and forth from his rank confusion, there is quite a long commitment when you decide to become an E9 in the military. Going back to the video from CARE 11, the National Guard provided a timeline of the formal documentation regarding the deployment that Tim didn't participate in. I completely believe what his peers have said, that they knew well in advance before the formal notice of sourcing order came out in May when Tim decided to formally retire. To be fair, there is another retired Command Sergeant Major that came out defending Tim in his timeline, named Command Sergeant Major Joseph Eustace.
Did you all know that you were probably going to Iraq when he put in his papers?
As far as I know, he did not know. The timeline is that he retired in May, and at that time, there were all kinds of rumors about us deploying, because that's what happens. There's rumors that you're going to deploy or you're going to go somewhere or whatever. In May, when he decided to retire, we had no, other than rumors, there was no NOS, which is the notice of deployment.
But then after that, another retired Command Sergeant Major named Doug Julian would come forward and echo Tom and Paul's feelings about the situation.
And I'm going to kind of start back in the fall of 2004, is what we received, my commander and myself of the 1st Brigade 34th Infantry Division Brigade Combat Team, what's called a notification of sourcing, which is a NOS. We were informed that we would be alerted to go to Iraq within the next upcoming year or time period out there. Start preparing your team, getting your team together, and let's get the process in play. In approximately February of 2005, my boss, my commander, Colonel, and the command team, we scheduled a meeting at Camp Ripley, Minnesota for getting everybody together so all the battalion sergeant majors, the battalion commanders, and the staff would get to see each other and kind of start the team building event in that concept there. At that meeting was Governor Tim Walz, or Sergeant Major Tim Walz at the time. And it was March of 2005, or it could have been April, give or take a month right in there. He came in, we sat and talked. He told me, he says, I have not been nominated. I am going forward with the battalion. I said, good, let's go. We got the team built. We're starting to build the team out there. A month lapsed or a little bit more lapsed, and in June, we went to Camp Ripley for our meeting again, and I walked into the meeting hall, and Tom Behrens was there, and I asked Tom what he was doing there, and that's when he informed me that he had quit. The other issue out there is that the individual that approved this was two levels higher than myself in the enlisted corps, and should have had Tim Walz come back to me and talk to me about this and discuss this as to why he was going forward now or not going forward now, after he had already told me he was going forward. He went around me, and the fact is that there's possibility he probably would have realized I would have probably no, it's too late, you're going forward, because we had already received our notification of sourcing. And there's one other little point out there that people say, well, he hadn't been notified yet. Yes, he had been notified.
We have a lot of timelines now, so let's clarify. The statement the National Guard gave KARE 11 was Walz retired in May 2005, then the unit received the notice of sourcing in July and the formal notice in August. In February 2005, we had the document of Tim filing to run for Congress. Then in March, his campaign issued a memo from Tim that he acknowledged that he might be deployed, but still intends to stay in the race for the congressional seat. Then Tom Behrens shared his understanding of the timeline that he filed in February 2005 for retirement, and the warning order came out in March. Paul Herr stated that the notice of sourcing originally came out in January 2005. Joseph Eustace said that there were only rumors up until the notice of sourcing July 2005. Doug Julian stated that the brigade received the initial notice of sourcing in 2004 and started having formal meetings before the end of the year with the rest of the command teams. Then Tim confirmed to him that he was going to Iraq in the March-April timeframe. Then Tim jumped the chain of command and went to division level to get retirement approval in June. Let me share why I believe Governor Walz knew about the upcoming deployment before the formal notice of sourcing came out. I served in a battalion level operations shop when I was in the Army. From my knowledge, the Old Guard only sent one company during the war in Iraq to deploy, but it was pretty common for us to receive WISE taskings. What the Worldwide Individual Augmentation System is for is requesting specific service members for overseas deployments, usually of a special skill. When these orders came down to battalion level, we had at least 6 months lead time before they would specifically task someone to begin the formal deployment process of notification and preparation. So I assume that regiment and the higher-ups knew well before that. So I can't imagine the National Guard, which would require more forecasting and planning, would only have the formal heads up at the higher staff leadership levels. Again, information trickles down from the command teams. So it would make sense that Tom Behrens and Joseph Eustace knew later than Paul Herr and Doug Julian, since they weren't sergeant majors yet like Tim was at the time. But that just leads me back to intent. If Tim's only reason to become a command sergeant major was in preparation to stage a political career, that would make a lot of sense. Again, with him deciding to retire so close after accepting the time obligation to become a sergeant major, it is rather suspicious how these timelines intersect. Overall, I think it's a very shady thing to do. First taking a spot to become a sergeant major, which could have gone to someone else and not utilizing it. Then when you're expected to perform the task underneath the umbrella, you break your commitment. But to be clear, if he bypassed his command to get his retirement approved, that was well within his rights. It just completely went against military command structure and the expectation and leadership that should have been displayed in that position. Weapon control is an incredibly polarizing topic in the country, and as we know, our elected officials are the ones that decide what we can and cannot own. But we follow their rhetoric with the hopes that they are being genuine in their reasoning and background on the topics. But this is politics, so that's a tall ask. During his campaign for vice president, the Kamala HQ X account posted a video of Tim Walz on August 6, 2024 from a conference where he spoke about gun control.
Hope woke up like many of you did 5 weeks ago and said, Dad, you're the only person I know who's in elected office. You need to stop what's happening with this. I'll take my kick in the butt for the NRA. I spent 25 years in the Army and I hunt. And I gave the money back, and I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
This infuriated the veteran community since Tim never deployed to a combat zone. So for Tim to use his hypothetical experience to influence changing the laws on such a sensitive topic rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But he be questioned about this and gave an interesting response.
The country is just starting to get to know you. I want to ask you a question about how you've described your service in the National Guard. You said that you carried weapons in war, but you have never deployed actually in a war zone. A campaign official said that you misspoke. Did you?
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly proud. I've done 24 years of wearing the uniform of this country. Equally proud of my service in a public school classroom, whether it's Congress or the governor. My record speaks for itself, but I think people are coming to get to know me. I speak like they do. I speak candidly. I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and I speak especially passionately about our children being in schools and around guns. So I think people know me. They know who I am. They know where my heart is. And again, my record has been out there for over 40 years to speak for itself.
And the idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said.
Of course, this would be a political tinder for lots of fires to be brought up later. Before we go into the next section of accusations, I do want to bring up a semi-relevant point. Before the vice president debate, Tim and JD did trade their blows back and forth. Tim about JD's background, education, and the couch thing.
Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, JD studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on! That's not what middle America is. And I gotta tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there?
And of course, JD brought up Tim's service and past governorship.
Well, look, I came from a family where nobody in my family had ever gone to law school. I grew up in a poor family. The fact that Tim Walz wants to turn it into a bad thing, that I actually worked myself through college, through law school, and made something myself. To me, that's the American dream. And if Tim Walz wants to insult it, I think that's frankly pretty bizarre. Now, look, what really bothers me about Tim Walz, it's not even the positions that he's taken, though certainly he has been a far left radical. You know what really bothers me about Tim Walz as a Marine who served his country in uniform? When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful to prepare your unit to go to Iraq, to make a promise that you're going to follow through, and then to drop out right before you actually have to go. I also think it's dishonest. Something, again, if you guys ever get an opportunity to ask Tim Walz or Kamala Harris some questions, he made this interesting comment that the Kamala Harris campaign put out there, and I bet they're regretting they put it out there now, because he said that and he was making a point about gun control, he said we shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets. Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq?
But I do want to highlight the debate. Watching this was so much more pleasantly civil, and I feel productive and informative for the voters in the presidential debates.
I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, who've had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim, and I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
You hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem. Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story.
I wish this was the norm, and as corny as it may sound, it was nice to see civility between two veterans on the world stage. But I did find it interesting that during Tim's vetting process, the Kamala campaign knew his military service would be a point of contention for the campaign. In an article published by Notice on August 8th, 2024, the specific points about his rank, Iraq deployment, and the Afghanistan support were already known to be misconstrued at best. It even talks about his retirement rank being misstated in his bio. It is odd to me that they knew that these would be points of contention for the campaign, but they still made the mistake of misidentifying his rank and still posted the Weapons of War video on the official X account to almost stoke the flames of controversy. Going back to the Weapons of War comment and Tim never doing a combat deployment, he would find himself in hot water again, first for a picture that surfaced, and second, an unsavory claim he made about being in Afghanistan. Let's clarify something. Tim did do a deployment to Italy at one point in his career, and the claims are that that was in support of Operation Enduring Freedom.
As the highest-ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in Congress and a veteran who served in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, I share your concerns.
And your military background?
I spent 24 years in the National Guard, some of that full-time. I was an artilleryman. I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. My battalion provided base security throughout the European theater from Turkey to England in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. And that same battalion is now in Iraq at this time.
But that does not make him a veteran of the Afghanistan campaign. So he is not a veteran of Operation Enduring Freedom as he claims in his sign. But I was able to find a campaign commercial when he was running for Congress talking about his deployment. So let's see how he conveyed it back in the day.
An everyday person comes along and helps put the impossible within our reach. The coach, who could see a championship 3 years before the big game. The teacher, who inspires generations one by one. The soldier, who served for 2 decades, but ready when they attacked. Everyday heroes. Right here in Minnesota, Tim Walz is one of those everyday people. Coach to the state champs. Teacher of the Year. Command Sergeant Major. Retiring 4 years late after a tour supporting the war in Afghanistan.
I'm not a politician, and I never plan to run for office. I've lived my life like most people, trying to do right by my family and my neighbors. But the same bad news night after night means we can't just sit on the sidelines. Our troops deserve a plan to win the peace. We can find solutions for healthcare and education. It's time to put the people's priorities first. But to change the priorities, we need to change the Congress. I'm Tim Walz, and I approve this message.
Retiring 4 years late, supporting the war in Afghanistan. Listen, I know this is technically true, but we definitely know what he's trying to imply. That he deployed to Afghanistan and returned late. So tying that back into the Iraq deployment that he retired early to avoid, I know that people will find every excuse of it just being interpreted wrong or play word scrabble to make it acceptable. But I think it's very clear that he just wanted to add fluff to his military career for a political purpose. The second Afghanistan controversy is when he gave a speech in 2019 and said he witnessed a ramp ceremony in Bagram, Afghanistan.
And as our political systems became more difficult for all of us to understand, I stood one night in the dark of night on the tarmac at Bagram and watched a military ramp ceremony. And if you've seen it, which these folks, many have, unfortunately, you don't leave the same.
In case you didn't know, this is the process of transferring remains of service members that were killed in action. As far as I could tell, there is no evidence of Tim ever being in Afghanistan in any capacity. I accidentally stumbled upon this accusation while researching this video. For me personally, as someone that served in the old guard and has conducted full honor funerals, this disgusted me the most. But if there is more light on this controversy, I'm sure he would have had a great response for yet another mix-up. There's a video that has a deep dive back to when Governor Walz was a congressman. In 2009, 2 Army combat veterans, one being Dave Toole, confronted Tim's office about his overseas claims.
Dave Toole, this is Travis Quinlan. We're both constituents and Iraq War vets. We're hoping to talk to someone about a photograph I have of Congressman Walz.
Okay.
Not sure if you have ever seen this picture before? Okay. Well, in it depicts 2004 Afghanistan veteran.
Right.
Congressman Walz is not an Afghanistan war veteran, is he?
He served in Italy as part of Operation Enduring Freedom.
Okay, but he didn't serve in Afghanistan, did he?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Hi, Rick. I'm Dave Toole. How you doing? Nice to meet you. There's a young lady in the other office that was helping us, but if you can, we're. You guys want to come in and have a seat? Sure. Thank you. I don't know if you are familiar with this picture at all. This was taken in 2004 here in Mankato, and it's actually been posted on the internet for quite some time, and nobody quite realized what it is. But in this picture, Congressman Walz here is holding a sign that says Enduring Freedom Veterans for Care. Well, Operation Enduring Freedom is limited to Afghanistan and the airspace directly above it. There's other units that are called up in support of it. I'm sure that's probably what his military orders said. Right. My concern, other than this picture, is that the congressman's website, his official biography, says simply that he was mobilized with his battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, without any other details. Don't you think it's reasonable? People might assume that means he served in Afghanistan.
Perhaps, I guess.
Okay.
I mean, what would you suggested be changed to? I guess
It's simply to add the words in Italy. Served in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in Italy. Simple as that, because then it specifies that he served in Italy.
If you serve in support of an operation, you're not necessarily a veteran of that operation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So your question is more about this picture than his biography.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
The biography is one of them. That's bad. That's misleading. That's a little bad. This right here, under current U.S. law, this could get the congressman probably thrown in jail in violation of the 2006 Stolen Valor Act, which says it is a crime, a federal crime, to portray yourself in writing or verbally as having received an award or decoration authorized by Congress that you didn't receive. Congressman Walz is clearly claiming in this sign, in this picture with this sign, to be an Enduring Freedom veteran.
Again, this blows my mind that he knew these accusations were out there, but he continued to misrepresent himself and the campaign did not seem ready to respond. Something else that we should cover that ties into his military service timeline is his claims about being in China during the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest and massacre in Beijing. An extremely brief summary of this event is from April 15th to June 4th, 1989 in Tiananmen Square, a protest of students and workers rallied against the communist government in China to try and reform the government in order to gain free speech and better living conditions. Eventually, the Chinese government sent in the military and between 800 and 1,000 people lost their lives. Well, Tim claimed to be in China when this happened.
As a young man, I was just going to teach high school in Foshan in Guangdong and was in Hong Kong in May of 89. And as the events were unfolding, several of us went in, and I still remember the train station in Hong Kong. But I was in Hong Kong when it happened. I was in Hong Kong on June 4th when Tiananmen happened.
Yeah. So Tim was in China May through June and was in country when the massacre happened. Well, it turns out that Tim was stateside taking over an arms room, and it's documented in the Alliance Nebraska Times-Herald. Then another newspaper article from the Chart and Records Service that Tim didn't leave for China until about August of 1989. Walz was accepted into the program last spring, but had about given up participating earlier this summer during the student revolts in parts of China. This would actually be brought up during the vice presidential debate.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of 89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot, I will get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID, and I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this, so I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
I misspoke. I hope we can all agree that that was a terrible response to the question. But we'll just add to the list of mix-ups. The last point I want to bring up that ties into his service is his DUI. In 1955, a Nebraska state trooper clocked Tim Walz at 96 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. The trooper smelled alcohol, so he conducted a field sobriety test, which Tim failed. Then he failed the breath test and also failed the blood test. He failed the BAC by .028 and in March 1996 pleaded guilty to reckless driving, but was able to get out of the DUI. KTTC covered this well, so I'll use a clip from them and link the original video below.
This dates back to September of 1995 when Walz, then 31, was pulled over by a Nebraska state trooper for going 96 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour speed zone. The trooper noted he detected a strong smell of alcohol on Walz's breath. He failed his field sobriety and preliminary breath tests. According to court records, a hospital blood test showed an alcohol level of 0.128%. Nebraska's legal limit at that time was 0.10. Walz was booked in county jail and charged with 2 counts, driving under the influence of alcohol and speeding. In March 1996, he pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of reckless driving. He was given a $200 fine. We want to show you a portion of the written court transcript from that 1996 plea hearing. The judge asked Walz why it was against the law to drive with a .128 blood alcohol level. Walz's response, shown on the screen, quote, "Not just statutory, it's just a dangerous situation, Your Honor, not just to myself, but to others who aren't even involved with it," end quote, to that statement in the transcript. We fast forward now to 2006. Walz, a resident of Minnesota at this time and running for Congress. When asked by news media about his 1995 arrest, his campaign said Walz wasn't drinking when he was pulled over in Nebraska, claiming he failed his field sobriety test due to a misunderstanding related to hearing loss due to his time in the National Guard. In September 2006, a statement to KTTC's sister station, KEYC in Mankato, a campaign spokesperson said, quote, "The DUI charge was dropped for a reason. It wasn't true." She went on to say, quote, "The trooper had him drive to the station and then leave on his own," end quote, to her statement. However, Nebraska court records tell a different story. In written testimony, the 1995 arresting state trooper said he transported Walz to the hospital for a blood test, and he took him to the county jail where he was booked.
Here's my problem with this, aside from him blaming the incident on hearing loss from the National Guard. In 1995, Tim would have been in the National Guard for 14 years, so he was more than likely an E7 Sergeant First Class. The number one reason service members get discharged from service is alcohol-related incidents. But there are those incidents that get swept under the rug for whatever reason. Being a senior NCO getting a DUI is obviously not leading by example. But if he is somehow able to use his military service to get out of it, then that'd be reminiscent of him jumping his chain of command like the Iraq deployment. But that's all my speculation. We will never know how much of an effect these incidents had on the presidential election, but it is definitely still affecting Governor Walz to this day.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, welcome to the Capitol. Welcome to the Capitol. It's great that you're up. Sir, you're welcome to come. Let me finish. Let me finish. Oh, hey, there's some passion in the building, which is a good thing.
Ironically, then Congressman Walz voted in support of the 2013 Stolen Valor Act. Do I think he'd be charged with stolen valor? No, I don't think so, since he didn't claim any specific combat awards. But if his original Stolen Valor Act, then he could be charged with it for misrepresenting his rank. But from a moral and ethical standpoint, do I think he misrepresented his service for political gain? Absolutely, I do. It sucks to see a fellow service member tarnish his and his family's military legacy. But knucklehead is what knucklehead does. If you made this point in the video, I appreciate you watching. I hope it's presented in a way that you can make your own decision whether Governor Walz misrepresented his military service intentionally. Special shout out to Alpha News and also Don't Walk, Run Production, since they did a good job documenting some of the specific things in this video and helped point me in the right direction for my own investigation. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. If you want to see other documentaries I've done on Stolen Valor, please check out these 2 videos. Remember, take care of yourself, take care of each other. Till next time.